Hi, I'm Roxanne Richardson, and this is Technique Tuesday. So I'm getting ready to cast on a large number of stitches onto my circular needle and then join it into the round. So there are a few challenges to casting on a large number of stitches when you are using the long tail cast on, which requires 2 strands of yarn, and that is how much tail do you need. The second challenge is keeping track of your stitch count as you're casting on, because it can be very difficult when they're all crammed on the needle to really count through and make sure you've got the right number. And then the third thing is making sure that the cast on edge isn't rolling around the cable of your circular needle, because anyone who's read a knitting pattern knows that you are told to join, being careful not to twist. So I'm going to take you through this process the way that I would do it. I'm using a center pole ball. Rather than measuring out the amount of tail and trying to estimate the amount I need, I have joined the center pole tail to the outer tail of this. Now this is a non-superwash wool, so I could use what's called spit felting, where I took out some of the plies, I moistened the ends, and then I created friction in order to felt them together. If you're using a superwash wool or a plant fiber, you can't use this technique, but there are other ways of casting on a large number of stitches without needing to estimate, and I will link to a video down below. So I have a length of waste yarn here. This is longer than the circumference of what it is that I'm going to be casting on. I'm using a yarn that is thinner than the one that I'm casting on with. You could use one that's the same. I don't think it would matter that much. Just don't use one that is thicker. This yarn is going to be used to help us keep track of our stitch count, but it will also help us when we're joining in the round to make sure that we're not going to get that twist. So the first thing I want to do is take my waste yarn and create a slip knot close to the end and just put it on my right hand needle tip. Then I'm going to get ready to start my long tail cast on. So I want the center tail over my index finger, and I want the outer tail over my thumb. I have my felted join a few inches away from me so that I'm not starting it right here. When I start my long tail cast on, I don't start with a slip knot. You are welcome to do that. I just don't find it to be necessary. Instead, I just twist my needle around, and that counts as my first stitch. So this is essentially a backwards loop cast on for my first stitch. I am going to cast on 25 stitches. So every 25 stitches, I'm going to mark my cast on. You could do 10 or 20, whatever you want. I'm just going to do 25. I need to cast on about 200 stitches, so that makes sense for me. So I just cast on 25. I just want to make sure that I've got my 25 before I mark it. So I'm just going to count these 25. So I do have 25. I'm not letting go of my cast on strands in my hand. But what I do want to do is use my thumb and forefinger to reach through and grab that yarn and pull it up here, and then use my other hand to pull that length through. So it's going to be long at this starting point. It will get shorter through there. So I can get my fingers back into position for casting on. Now this waste yarn right here, I want it to stay out of the way, so I'm going to just grasp it with my right hand and hold it up against my needle as I cast on, just to keep those yarn tails from mixing in with each other. So now I'll do the next 25. So I've got 25. Again, because it's a large number, I just want to count these 25. So I can look at where this has been marked. I can see that it is between this stitch right here and that stitch. So I know that where I need to count starts from here. So I do have 25. So once again, I'm going to still hold on to my yarn tails. I'm going to grab that waste yarn and pull it up so that I can pull it over. Hold it up against my palm or against my needle and get back into position for the next 25. So while I am confirming my stitch count every time I'm doing 25 stitches, I'm not really paying attention to how many of these I've done. So I can stop at any time and I can count by 25s because that's how many I'm doing each time. So 25, 50, 75. So I know that I'm about a third of the way there and that I need to keep going. So one of the things that I'm doing as I'm going along is I am stretching this out to make sure that the waste yarn isn't shorter than along here. This will help later on when I want to make sure that it's not twisting around the edge. So I believe I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So I have 150, and so I have 50 more to go. Now, as I'm using up my waste yarn, the tail is getting shorter. It doesn't take as much to pull it through. And now I have my last 25. Now, this is exactly 25. I'm not going to have anything to anchor this yarn tail through at the end. So I can, because I need exactly 25 more, what I can do is anchor it after the 24th of the 25th, just so that this waste yarn is running along the entire length. If I needed 210, then I could mark it at the 200 and then just work the final 10. You can do what works for you. So I think I have 24. 2, 4, 6, 8. Yep, I have 24. So I'm going to pull this waste yarn up one more time. And then I'm going to cast on my final stitch. So I've got all 200 stitches cast on, and I can confirm that by counting my sets of 25, 25, 50, 75, 100, 25, 150, 175, and then I've got my 200. So I want to cut my thumb yarn. I no longer need to have that attached. I want to bring this around, and I'm looking for if these are crossing over and twisting around. So I can check this. I can see that this one here is twisted all the way around. So I can bring it back down here. And then I'm sure that nothing is over the top. So now I can join in the round, be confident that I'm not going to have a twist. So when I join in the round, I don't have to knock that slip knot off first. I can just insert my needle through that first stitch, work it, and then as that old stitch comes off the needle, the slip knot will come off the needle as well. Because I started with a twisted loop and the rest of the cast on stitches are twisted loops that were then knitted, that's what those live stitches on the needle are. When I join in the round, I have now knit my first twisted stitch, so when I put a beginning of round marker, I will put it on the needle now. I do have a video on creating a jogless join in the round where I use this twisted cast on and then treat it as the last cast on stitch after it's been worked, and then how I weave in my yarn tail to join the end of the round to the beginning of the round and make an absolutely jogless join that is invisible. I will leave a link down below to that video. In addition to the videos I mentioned earlier, casting on without having to estimate the length of the yarn tail, and the jogless cast on, you might also be interested in this video on using any cast on method, including the long tail cast on, to get started on a tubular or Italian cast on, or this one on casting on in pattern. If you have any comments or questions about this video, you can leave those down in the comments below. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.